Mondays with Mike. Did you think that the show notes contained enough of important stuff? I'm thinking, oh, 2.5, 3 out of 6 of them were like my special interest.
They certainly contain questions that are worth discussing, if only because of the impact they're going to have on the future.
Yeah, like the van attack one, I'm just, every once in a while something like this happens, and it's, wow, we strive to live in a safe world in some respects, but in other respects, is that it seems like we're really far from it. And so I just wasn't sure about the van attack one. It seemed like it spoke for a lot of stories that are the front page on one day and then they're gone the next day.
The issue is still one that is worth discussing, that the infrastructure is not in place to prevent it from happening. For whatever reason, as a society, we understand the danger that exists from something like it happening, but don't want to put in the infrastructure, even in a temporary manner, to stop it from happening when something like a parade happens. And that's what's very confusing, is that for whatever reason, I don't know, cities, towns, they allow like cars to speed by at really fast speeds without putting any kind of
Mm-hmm.
barrier or any kind of significant wall or barricade when there's a parade. And here's the deal with parades, right? Parades usually have to be asked for in advance. You need to get a license or a permit or some kind of permission. So it's not as if it was a spontaneous, unknowable thing that it was going to happen. And if something can be planned for to stop, to prevent an awful thing from happening, then that means that there's probably some that I guess the point I'm trying to make is there's always a lesson in everything. But before we talk about it, we should maybe talk about what it
Yeah.
is we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. So what happened was in Liverpool, they had won some kind of soccer championship over there, and there was a big parade, a big party in the middle of the street. A bunch of people from Liverpool, fans of the Liverpool FC, were celebrating there, and then on comes a van driven by an ex-member of the British military, if I'm not mistaken, and drives through a bunch of people out there having the parade, causing havoc. And dozens of people admitted to the hospital. That's the story. You just think, wow, everybody has a car. And everybody could do this. But maybe we want to focus on the specifics more. Did you find more about it?
No, the details that I could glean were pretty much that somebody drove a car through a crowd of people in a very dense urban environment, and that they're still deciding how to respond to it. I haven't seen much progress in terms of the guy getting charged with a crime, or the if I had to guess, the details of whatever they're investigating, right? So that they're keeping those
Hmm.
details mostly under wraps, which is usually what you want to do for an investigation if you're trying to do like a criminal investigation, because you don't
Right.
really want to talk about the key specifics of what of the circumstances necessarily, because for one thing, actually, I'm not sure if they've ruled out that anybody else was involved. I know they
Mm.
stated publicly that they didn't think it was like an attack, a terror attack. That I did see was there was like a news conference of sorts where they said we think it was just one guy. He drove a car through a lot of people. That was bad, and we
Hmm.
don't think it was active political violence or something. But I do find it strange anytime there's an announcement that quickly after an
Yeah.
event where they've just ruled out that I do find a little strange. If they've just
Hmm.
automatically ruled out the possibility of anybody else, that one I didn't quite understand. But to the question of cars and large gatherings of people, there should be some kind of infrastructure put in place anywhere in a major city that there might be a parade or some kind of mass protest where you can rapidly stop cars from running them over. And what do I
Hmm.
mean by that? Steel metal bars or something in the sidewalks or in the ground in major thoroughfares that you can quite literally like press a button and up to go the barriers. No cars can drive through. They'll hit the steel bars and stop. They'll crash. The whole issue I see with these events is it's not as if hasn't happened before. It had something similar happened
Yeah.
in Nice, France, with the trucks, and other things like this have happened before, where people in Seattle that happened on the highway, that was bad. The whole
Yeah.
point is that as a society, for whatever reason, we haven't established effective barricades or impediments to what is a very dangerous tool to cause harm to other people. It's not as if it's a super complicated thing. It's probably just comes down to money, right? That cities don't want to spend the money to put in barricades or some kind of metal wall or stone wall or temporary edifice that could stop, because it's physics, right? If you stop an object in motion with something of equal strength or greater, it's going to stop, right? A moving
Hmm.
object that hits a wall is going to stop. These things happen over and over again, and what I don't see is society adapting to or evolving to respond to what are foreseeable or predictable threats, right? It's probably a simple fix, right? It like literally just putting dumpsters or something in front of the entries and the exits or something. But I guess there are problems there. Is if you pen people in, they won't be able to exit. But there's got to be a way. So I'm thinking metal rods or something spaced apart so that you can still walk through them. You know, like a subway turnstile. They need something like that
Hmm.
for, even if it's temporary, for like major roads or barriers, or you just ban all traffic within the certain blocks of the city in the middle of a parade or a mass gathering. There's got to be a way to better prevent this stuff from happening, because we know that there's ways to stop this from happening, right?
Hmm.
It's not as if it's some magical thing that's occurring, right? That
Hmm.
people are appearing out of nowhere. No, they have to get there from somewhere. It's one
Right.
thing if it's something that can't be stopped. That's really scary.
Yeah.
The planes moving really fast, super scary. Can't stop it with that unless you have special tools, unless you have like anti-aircraft or jets or something to shoot them down.
But we can guard the airports, though.
Absolutely, we absolutely can. But people still have
Hmm.
private airports.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of
Hmm.
circumstances where it could go awry. But for cars have to travel on roads, and roads, there's only so many of them, and you can
Yeah.
block them. It's not difficult to block a road. They do it all the time for tolls, for toll
Hmm.
booths. It's not that they can't do it, it's that they don't do it. And the question for always and ever is, what are the lessons from these events in terms of building city infrastructure so that you can reduce the possibility of it happening, right? Such that it doesn't happen as much. That's the big question.
Yeah. And I watch this YouTube channel called Highway Videos 3434. So the Washington Department of Transportation made these videos. They may still be making them, but they started making them in, it appears, the late 70s, where they would just drive and record what was going on as they drove down a major Washington highway. And it's funny to see how things have changed since then, because many of these are places that I have driven as well. Things you notice about the past in these videos is, one, there's a lot less development. Two, the architecture is different. Three, the cars are old, obviously, and the styles of the cars. Another thing I noticed, though, is that by comparison, the cars go really slowly. And they're not going 25 miles per hour. But on the freeway, most of them aren't going above 70. Like it really appears to be rare in the 80s. And of course, they had the freeway speed limit of 55 that Nixon, I believe, put in place during the oil crisis that went the way of the dodo under Clinton. But I think about how cars used to drive slower. And in the 90s, when I was a kid, I don't remember cars being so noisy. I think they've gotten noisier too. They've also gotten more fuel efficient, so it goes both ways. But it's a long deviation. Every once in a while, I notice that it appears that a car will have like a go-kart engine or something. And which, one thing that's creative and good engineering, there's these cars are just these mammoth beasts that everybody has access to, and there's regulation around them, sure, but a lot of people do whatever they want with them. And are cars deadly weapons? Would you say that they're deadly weapons? And anything else you want to respond to in there is fine.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about this before, but road injury is one of the top 10 causes of death worldwide. So
Hmm.
just because something's ubiquitous that we've grown to accept its presence in our lives it doesn't change the fact that it's a lot of power that any one person can use at any given time. Anybody who knows how to drive a car and has access to a car. And so there's a lot of trust that we as a society place in the hands of people who drive cars. That's why we have licensure procedures. That's why you have to do the driving test. There's a whole bunch of things that go into making sure that people who are driving cars, at a minimum, right, have some notion of what they're doing. And there's a reason for that. It's because we recognize that for those who don't or can't drive a car, they really should not be driving on the roads because the risks are so great. And it's a trade-off that we make as a society, right? We accept that there's a certain level of risk by having cars as this technology that proliferates all around the world. And frankly, the barriers that we put in place aren't enough, right? Because people, you're right, drive on suspended licenses, or they drive after they've gotten DUIs, or they drive without a license. Like there's all these, the unfortunate reality is that cars are easier to access than the tools that are in place to limit the access to those cars, if that makes sense. And sure, there could be a time where technology improves, and frankly, there probably is a time now that technology has improved where we could have something like biometric readings for accessing a car or unlocking a car, right? They have it for gun technology where you can't use the trigger unless they do like a DNA scan of your hand because here's the deal, it's too easy for somebody to utilize a car. And the weird thing is this is actually the risk of it is greater for a society that has more cars like the United States because there's so much wealth and there's so much availability of cars, is that you have so many different levels of cars. You've got older cars that may not be working as well and that people don't necessarily repair as much, and you've also got more modern vehicles. Yes, cars are deadly. We as a society absolutely recognize that they're deadly because there's all these things in place to try and limit people using them. Driver's licenses, speed limits. If you get too many DUIs, you're banned from driving forever. Or you have to do that test where it's like a blood alcohol test for somebody who gets too many DUIs. They can't even start the car unless they pass the breathalyzer. As a society, we allow a lot of people to drive cars. And at the outer limits, in some cases, we don't always do as good a job after in terms of testing or
Yeah.
medical testing. So I'll give you an example. Due to privacy laws, it's not entirely clear that if somebody gets diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia or with any kind of mental debilitating illness, right, that affects their perception of reality, that they're immediately reported to driving authorities or licensing. It's not clear that happens.
Is that just an unsettled legal question?
I'm not sure. So I'm not actually sure because there are laws on the books for HIPAA that you can't disclose medical histories. I'm not entirely sure that people who get diagnosed with advanced Alzheimer's, dementia, with any kind of mental or physical impairment that affects their perception of reality, it's not so clear that they still get to drive with their license. If there's any exceptions put into the law that maybe if somebody has some real difficulties with recognizing the difference between here and there, right? Maybe they shouldn't be
Right.
in a car because you see these stories. I see it mostly in media and fiction. I like watching the show Grey's Anatomy, a medical show set in Seattle. I've seen pretty much all of it. But there's a few
Yeah.
episodes where things happen, where people drive a car into an emergency room, or they drive a car into a store, or they drive a car into all sorts of stories where someone like drives a car into something, and it's because they're impaired in some way that we as a society could probably have figured out beforehand, tested beforehand. This is my long roundabout way of saying that if we had universal health care and we had greater access for everybody to have access to therapy and psychiatrists and just general mental health checks, it would be a much better way of figuring out if there's great liabilities out there in terms of people on the road. Because we don't do that good of it, again, after someone gets their driver's license, of making sure that they're still competent to drive. Yes, people who are visually impaired who wear glasses have to acknowledge when they get their license, yep, I still have need glasses, I still have glasses, but it's not so clear It worries me, right? Because as the population gets older, with the boomers being that huge generation of folks that are getting up there in age, and there's just so many of them, that our tools of figuring out, and I understand the point of privacy laws. I understand it. I get the point of medical secrecy, but society is going to have to take a real hard look. A really serious question has to be asked of at what point is there an intervention made if somebody is medically found to not be capable of discerning reality? And that's a serious
Hmm.
question that I'm not so sure. And maybe it's politically tricky. I'm sure it is politically
Yeah.
difficult because
Uh-huh.
I'm not so sure that we ban people from voting who have no idea of distinguishing between who people are or where they are. It's not so clear.
AKA the average voter.
That's not what I mean at all. The whole point I'm making there is I'm not so sure that we ever would remove the right to
Uh-huh.
vote, even if somebody
Right.
has no
Yeah.
idea where they are or what they're doing or where they've been for many years. There's all sorts of things that exist as these sort of open-ended problems for society. And when we're talking about cars, the one that gnaws at me is perceptions of reality. So people who are drunk can drive cars. That's how people get DUIs. People who are mentally impaired in some other way, if they have undiagnosed paranoid schizophrenia, they think people are after them, and so they just run down a whole bunch of people they think are after
Gosh,
them.
how
It's
awful.
scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Paranoid people do scary things. It's been known to happen in the past of
Uh-huh.
because the danger is in the inability to distinguish friend from foe, right? The inability to acknowledge the limits that we usually have in our everyday of who is safe to be around, right?
Yeah.
The sort of fight instinct kicks in instead of the flight instinct. And that a part of it too is the mental inhibitions remove that sort of barrier in one's mind that says I shouldn't fight at all because fighting's dangerous and risky.
Hmm.
It leads to, and that happens with drunk people a lot. Is that they get into fights and like public
Yeah.
brawls. But anyways, there are tools available. When I'm thinking about drunk people, I understand why the breathalyzer technology only exists for those who've been found guilty of a DUI and want to go back to driving. But that
Hmm.
isn't to say that such a technology could exist for
Hmm.
every car, and you could put in incentives, right? You could say reduce your car insurance, or you'll give you a tax break or some kind if you install the breathalyzer in your car because it makes society safer, right? There's ways. It's just we don't have the political will because people are like, I want to be able to drive drunk in my car if I need to. No, absolutely not. There's no
Right.
circumstance. Society is better for every second that a person who's drunk or inebriated just isn't driving behind the wheel of a car. They can walk. We
Yeah.
know the danger is ever present. That's why
Hmm.
people get arrested and fined huge amounts of people, it turns out, for DUIs, right? I look at the numbers. We had
Yeah.
Mothers Against Drunk Driving managed to raise the talk about an effective protest movement. They got the age of drinking up to 21. At 18, you can fight in a war, you can vote, you can sign contracts, you can buy a house, you can do any number of things, but no, you
Take
can't
out.
take out loans. You can take out huge student loans. You can saddle
Big
yourself with
ones.
financial debt to the end of your days. That's happening
Uh-huh.
now where they're garnishing the wages of old people who still have student loans that were deferred. Trump administration's, nah, you got to start
Yeah.
paying all those huge ballooning interest paying student loans. We're going to just garnish everything you own, all your money, all your social security, everything you have that's not nailed down, we're just going to
The
snatch up and you're going to pay
the
these loans.
Yeah, the balloon payment. What an invention. But anyway, yeah, they can't drink. They're not allowed to drink at 21 even, because that's how serious it is.
The point I'm making is that we were able as a society to see that problem and oh, the change was made. It happened across the board. There's no state in the country where you can legally purchase alcohol unless you're 21 or over. So if we can do that, we can make cars way safer for everybody. And we have. Think of the push to put in seatbelts in cars, right? Initially, cars didn't have seatbelts, and so people keep splatting all over the place when they crash their cars. Maybe that's a bad thing. Let's put seatbelts in all cars. Or, but the whole point I'm making there's technologies that could be put into cars to stop them from speeding period over a certain mile. I can understand why you want a car to go fast in case of an extreme emergency, like if there's a wildfire bearing down or a tornado or a tidal wave or something, you want your car to go really fast. But there's
Hmm.
technologies that could limit the how fast a car goes, period. They exist. We just don't put them in, but we could. We just don't.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's the point. It's that there's always lessons from all these things that happen in history, and the question here is, was it intentional or was there something else going on? And I'm sure the investigation will be ongoing. But I will say that for if self-driving cars do become a thing, that actually would help to reduce unplanned for events. Sudden loss of control of a car if somebody has a heart attack or if they have a diabetic attack. I saw a video of a guy who he had some like diabetic response to something that made it very difficult for him to drive, and so the cops stopped him and they kept giving him commands and he wasn't responding because his body wasn't working, right? That he was having a bad effect of one bad consequence of diabetes that left him unable to move or act. If you have self-driving cars or some way of the car noticing that the driver is impaired for whatever reason, then that technology could actually just stop the car and contact emergency services. That would be useful. I could see a benefit there, self-driving cars, that it would be one way to help reduce these kinds of events. Because heart attack is a big thing, right? No one can really predict that they're about to have a heart attack. And the whole issue is if somebody's driving a car, it doesn't have to even be a heart attack. It could be a stroke. It could be any number of medical things. If someone faints, they have an allergic reaction to something. Say you've got a peanut allergy and you get a muffin, and they didn't say in the muffin, oh, by the way, this was like in a facility that processed nuts, right? Pine nuts for the
Hmm.
ingredients. It happens, right? We don't live in a perfect world. I'm sure at some point there will be technologies put in place that are able to better detect when an emergency is happening, as it's happening, and to bring a car to a gentle stop somewhere, or pull it off to the side of the road, or to contact an ambulance. Because they have those. Do you ever see those commercials for? I think it's called Life Alert, where if somebody faints,
Oh, of course, life alert.
I've fallen and I can't get up.
Yeah, no, help, I've fallen and I can't get up. And then the guy is with life alert. You can live alone without ever being alone. And that's why I wear one. Whoa, okay, he wears one.
We as a society almost definitely need something similar to that for when you drive alone, right?
Hmm.
Here's the deal. And it's not just like extreme medical issues. It's also just falling asleep while driving. People get drowsy when they go on long road trips, and we don't have enough places where you can legally park on the side of the road and just take a nap when you're driving.
Hmm.
I would not recommend you try it on the highway. You'll get a ticket. There are rest stops when you drive sometimes at like national parks, and you see them occasionally on the highway, but not nowhere near enough. And that, of course, is to prevent homelessness, right? Homeless people camping out at parking
Right.
lots and sleeping. But the trade off there is that you have some people who drive on the road and aren't accurately gauging their tiredness level. They drift off and then they swerve off the side of the road, or they swerve into another car, or they any number of things happen. There's ways we could try to reduce the bad things from happening. More rest stops, breathalyzers in cars. Anyways, I've talked a long time now about this topic. I could.
Here's what I would compare it to. A lot of it has to do with our built environment. Give me an example. In Svalbard, which is an island belonging to Norway, which is up near the Arctic Circle, and in Svalbard, you're not allowed to leave town without a gun.
Polar
Because
bears.
you.
Polar bears, you might get attacked, and they don't have the resources, so you need a gun. And I think to myself, there's a law saying you need a gun. There's no law in the U.S. saying you need a car, but in many areas, effectively, someone in your family needs them, like rural areas. So the built environment, suburbia, there you need them, and suburbia is another matter. But just the way we build things. When I was in my first incarnation of college, which didn't last all too long, I took a bunch of policy classes. And they said, oh, you're required to build and maintain a certain amount of parking per square foot of commercial development that you have. And this was in Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, the requirement was actually lower for what you had to do in parking than in Washington, in the urban parts of it anyway. And at the time, I thought, but sometimes I'm driving around and it takes me like 15 minutes to find a parking space. And because they had a clear advocacy. They were like, we want it to be less. And I thought, but it's already too little because I spent too long getting a parking space. But now I can see both sides of it. Now, if anything, I've changed my mind and flipped my advocacy. I'm not really advocating very loudly for it. But Los Angeles in particular is very car dependent. But a lot of places, they don't really have to be. We've built that way so far. We don't have to do it anymore. We could have developments with like narrow roads that you can get an ambulance on, or you could bring a delivery truck. But it doesn't need to be much wider than that. And you have to have fire codes and stuff. But we built things in order to, in effect, require cars.
Let me interject. You want it big enough so you can have a fire truck get in and leave, right? Because you want to be able to respond to fires. So all roads at a minimum need to be as big or bigger than a fire truck.
Or you could make smaller fire trucks. I've thought a lot about this.
Yeah, you could. Or you can they could go vertical instead of broad. You could. No, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
So, I think, although this happened in the UK, this van attack, but I think we built our way into this, and it's time to start building our way out of this. Let's dig our way out of the hole in The Simpsons, and then they're like, we'll dig our way out, and then Chief Wiggum's, no, dig up, stupid.
I was thinking we can build designated parade routes or areas that don't have cars at all. We have stadiums, right, when there are sporting events. Why don't we have designated parade lanes? There's space. It's not as if, I guess in the UK there's not as much space, but there's still space. You don't need to have these huge parades and protests in the middle of city streets. Have them out in the field or something and put barriers all around, right? And people have to park like way far away so you can see cars coming from miles away if something like this happens. The part of the reason that something like this happened is because they combine the urban environment with the huge numbers of people, which makes it a very difficult situation to keep everybody safe. Think of music festivals. If you move people like away from the concentrated urban environment, it's much easier to see the risk from further away. But that, of course, carries its own different risks. But look, it's impossible to account for every situation, no question. But this is one of those situations where it is predictable, the risk is clear, and so that means that the prevention measures, whatever they may be, can be put in place. It's just the question of why they aren't. And it usually comes down to money, or it comes down to a lack of political will, that it sends the wrong message symbolically. Oh, we're too totalitarian of the society for wanting to put up barricades from cars steamrolling over people. Oh no, too controlling. Societies are built to reduce risk and protect people and to ultimately solve collective action problems that we might have, stopping a stampede of cows or something.
Yeah, and we can vary it state by state, too. Like, we could have laboratories of democracy, and people can vote with their feet. And I think we could have a lot more streets become no cars, or in Germany, as they call them, Fußgängerzone.
Yeah.
I love that word.
I also understand what you're saying about the built environment. So I think a lot about high-speed rail and how fast the trains are in Tokyo, right? If you look at the amount of pride that they take in making sure that these very fast trains are there on time, reliably, every day, that you could time your watch to it pretty much of how fast the trains are and how efficient and effective they are at moving people from point A to point wherever. And the problem I see a lot in the United States is that trains aren't always on time. And the other issue is that there's not quite so many, if any at all, dedicated commuter rail tracks. That the commuter rail, a lot of it in the United States, especially for Amtrak, shares the railroads with container trains. And that's super duper odd, right? Because it sends a weird message about a commitment to public transportation, that we don't just have dedicated public transportation everything. Public transportation, bus lanes, trains, sidewalks from one end of the country to the other. Like, for whatever reason, communities all saying, no, I can't do it, no, for environmental reasons.
Not in my backyard, yeah.
You need actual leadership from someone like, oh, I don't know, a President Eisenhower saying, we're going to have a giant highway government run system of the entire country for safety reasons. Because he went all over Europe and was like, the roads suck. We can't get our tanks and our trucks from here to there, and here to there is where we need to get to win the war. So what happened if we had a giant war in the big old place that's 3 times the size of Europe or whatever? I don't actually know the
Hmm.
exact size difference between the U.S. and Europe, but we're bigger, right? I'm pretty sure combined.
I think it depends on whether you include European Russia. I'm not 100% sure.
I don't know that I'd include all of Russia. There's like a part of
No,
Russia that little
I
port they have, that little weird port they have in between all the Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. There's
right.
like that tiny little sliver of Russia.
Kaliningrad.
It's the
Yeah.
weird. You look at a map and it's like, why is
Oh, we're just Russia. No, nothing to see here.
why is
No,
there
no.
this tiny little sliver
Um,
of Russia in the middle of
yeah.
Europe?
Mondays with Mike.